All right. Well, welcome everyone. I am showing that it is high noon here in Colorado. If you've just joined us, feel free to use the chat area to introduce yourself and let us know where you are logging in from. But welcome. We are delighted to be here today and to have you all joining us. My name is Christine Krieger, and I am the professional development consultant for the Colorado State Library. And today we are going to talk about becoming emotional scientists and leading with emotional intelligence. So we're going to talk a little bit about the science of emotions. We're going to do some activities to help you get in touch with your feelings. And then we're going to brainstorm practical ways to apply emotional intelligence from a leadership perspective in your organization. And we want to make sure that we mention that when we're talking about leadership in an organization, we're talking about leadership from any level and not just from a management or supervisory role. But before we jump in, I would like to also welcome my co-presenter today, Amy Shipley, who is the Executive Director of the Basalt Regional Library.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Before we begin, I'm going to paste a link to the playbook for today's session into the chat. This is a document that is the handout. It has all the resources that we're going to talk about today. And if you can pull that up and open it, it will allow you to participate in the activities we have. So pull that up on your screen and we have that there for you. So if you have time later, you can print it out, you can take notes, journal, draw, anything you want to do to capture what we covered today.
And Amy, just quickly, just in case somebody doesn't have access to Google Drive or that is more difficult, I also uploaded a Word document, so they can take either one.
Perfect.
All right.
So to start, we want to take just a moment and have you think about how you're feeling today and jot that on page 2 of your playbook. And we also wanted to acknowledge that the past 2.5 years have been very challenging. These are not normal times. So as you think about how you're feeling today, just know as we go through today's session that whatever you're feeling is okay. And it's important to check in and notice how you feel. Overall, our goals for this session are for you to understand that emotions are powerful, emotions are valid, and as a leader, whether you consider yourself an emotional person or not, it benefits everyone when leaders are emotionally intelligent because the people you are leading have emotions and need to have those emotions seen and validated.
Okay, so before we jump in and start talking about the science of emotions and emotional intelligence, what we want you to do is go ahead and click on the link that Amy put for the playbook or click on the file that I put in. There is a self-assessment on page 2, and we're going to give you about 5 minutes to take that self-assessment. Basically, you're going to rate yourself from 0 to 10, with 10 being the highest on each one of those items. It should go fairly quickly. Just go with your gut. Don't overthink it. And your scores are just going to be for you. You're not going to be sharing it with anybody else. We're not going to be, posting them up on a wall to see who got, high stars or not. So we're going to give you about 5 minutes for that. If you just joined us and you don't see the link to the playbook, I'll have Amy post that back in if she would.
Already on it.
All right. This is why I partner with Amy on many things. So we're going to give you guys just about 5 minutes to complete that. Once again, just on paper. If you don't want to download the Word document or whatever, you can just take on page 2. Just do a quick rating between 1 and 10, with 10 being the highest. And let us know if you have any questions. And we just let another couple people in. So Amy, I'm going to have you post that link again. One of the drawbacks to Zoom is that when you're new, you don't see the chat that has already happened, which I find is unfortunate. For those of you who just signed in, and here comes one more, we are having people click on the link that Amy has just posted in chat. It is our playbook for today. Take a look at page 2. And do a quick self-assessment. Just rate yourself from 0 to 10, 10 being the highest on each one of those items. This is just for you. You won't be sharing it for anybody. And we've got about 4 more minutes for you guys to complete that. Just about 2.5 minutes left. Let us know if you have questions, and then we'll be moving forward. So. And just another 1.5 minutes or so. Let us know if you need more time. And if you have just joined us, we're being quiet because we have given people a self-assessment to do. We've got about 1 minute or so left. If you haven't had a chance to take the self-assessment, you can take it at your leisure. And as we go through some of the activities today, you can just kind of follow along. Oops, sorry. Something popped up on my computer and I went ahead. So we'll be able to get everybody caught up here. So just about another minute. Does anybody need any more time for the self-assessment? You can type that in chat. Okay, looks like a couple of you are saying all set. Okay, many of you are starting to say that you are done. So I think we will go ahead and move forward. Once again, if you didn't have a chance to take the self-assessment, it is on page 2. You can take it at your leisure, and we will go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk about the science of emotions.
Thanks, Christine. So as we were doing research for this presentation, it became clear that there is no single definition of emotion. And despite technological advances allowing us to map the brain, exactly how and where emotions are created is unclear. There are many theories, however, and here are 3 of them. First, the classic view. How many of you remember learning that facial expressions are universally recognized and that emotions are the same across all cultures? You can just say a thumbs up or a yes in chat, right? I remember learning that. So the classic view posits that our emotions are artifacts of evolution and that they're universal, basically that they're the fingerprint for emotions, and that people of every age and every culture and every part of the world should experience sadness more or less as you do. However, no such fingerprint has been found. Then there's the theory of basic or core emotions. Another theory is that there's 6 core emotions: fear, anger, sadness, disgust, and surprise. And some theorize that different emotions are linked to specific areas of the brain. Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, is somewhat based on the premise of core emotions and the idea that each emotion has a specific reaction in the body. However, he also stated that, quote, there are hundreds of emotions along with their blends, variations, mutations, and nuances. Indeed, there are many more subtleties of emotion than we have words for, end quote. In his later works, he focuses more on what we can do with our emotional data than what causes emotions. And we'll circle back to Goleman's work when we talk about how to apply emotional intelligence in the leadership context. And finally, we have the theory of constructed emotion. Lisa Feldman Barrett proposes in her book, How Emotions Are Made, that emotions are constructed by our brains in the moment rather than simply being experienced in the body. Essentially, an emotion is your brain's creation of what bodily sensations mean. What we do know is that emotions are the product of complex processing systems, including the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex in the brain, which essentially convert sensory information into the psychophysiological and behavioral changes that we refer to as emotional responses. On page 4 of your playbook, you can see a diagram of the brain with brief explanations of the largely agreed upon roles of different parts of the brain. We also know that between people, the physiological reaction is not consistent. It's not the same from person to person. What evokes sadness and anger for me may not be the same as for Christine, and how I experience sadness or anger might also be very different.
Okay, so regardless of where emotions come from, it's important to remember that emotions matter. In fact, according to Mark Brackett, who is author of the book Permission to Feel, and all of the books that we're mentioning are included in your playbook. It's on the last page in the resources. But according to Mark Brackett, emotions literally direct everything that we do in life. They direct where our attention goes, our decision-making ability, because we literally perceive the world differently depending on how we're feeling, our social relations, how we approach others, how they approach us, health, because emotions cause physical reactions in the body, and things like performance, creativity, and effectiveness. Emotions are also contagious. The brain's limbic system is an open loop system, which depends largely on external factors to regulate itself. So unlike a closed loop system, like our circulatory system, which is self-regulating, this means that humans rely on our connections with others for our own emotional stability. So the emotional states of others can affect our hormone levels, our cardiovascular function, our sleep rhythms, and our immune function. Leaders provide cues for how people respond in any given situation, and they can directly impact the emotions of the group. So we need to be able to use our emotions as tools or data. As leaders, we need to become emotional scientists. So if you're following along in the playbook, you can see on page 5, you can not see on the screen. You can see on page 5 a copy of this chart. So when we're talking a little bit more about emotional intelligence, according to Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence is a group of skills that allows us all to recognize and understand emotions and then to use that awareness to manage behavior and relationships. Goleman was not the first to theorize about emotional intelligence, but his 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence, popularized the concept, and it really was one of the first to apply it to the workplace. Emotional intelligence comprises 4 core elements and 19 sub-elements, and you can see those on the screen here. Once again, if you're looking at page 5 of your playbook or on the screen, Goleman, his model of emotional intelligence breaks down the 4 core elements into personal competence, or how we manage ourselves, and social competence, which determines how we handle relationships. He also breaks it down into recognition of emotions in ourselves and others, and regulation of emotions in ourselves and others. So for those of you who were able to complete the self-assessment, and we did that, if you joined us a little bit late, we did that right at the beginning of the session, and you will have access to everything at the end of the session when I post the archive. But take a closer look at your self-assessment. What we gave you was not a formal assessment where you're going to add up all the numbers and come up with your emotional intelligence score. We really wanted just to give you a gauge of how you might rate yourself on the 19 sub elements. There's no right or wrong, and anything that you gave yourself like a 6 or above is actually pretty good. So make a quick note of where you scored the highest, and we're going to revisit this after we dive deeper into each of the core elements.
So let's start with self-awareness. The definition of self-awareness is knowing one's internal states, preferences, resources, and intuitions. Essentially, knowing what I'm feeling and why. Self-awareness is the basis of emotional intelligence. You can't manage your emotions if you don't know what they are. Self-awareness also extends to a person's understanding of his or her values and goals. Someone who is highly self-aware knows where they are headed and why. The science of self-awareness is that it uses the prefrontal part of the brain to monitor feelings about our preferences. Self-awareness also utilizes our amygdala, which is where our gut feelings originate. Essentially, a stream of feeling runs alongside our stream of thought, but we're not taught to pay as much attention to our emotions as our thoughts. We can often be blindsided by intense emotions because we weren't paying attention. So you can see that self-awareness is comprised of emotional awareness, reading one's own emotions and recognizing their impacts, accurate self-assessment, knowing one's strengths and limits, and self-confidence, a sound sense of one's worth and capabilities. In his book, Permission to Feel, Mark Brackett shares an acronym for skills related to emotional intelligence that fit well for both the personal and social competencies. On page 6 of your playbook, you can see the RULER acronym, and I'll tell you what those stand for. RULER is recognizing emotions in oneself and others. U is understanding the causes and consequences of emotions. L is labeling emotions with a nuanced vocabulary. E is expressing emotions in accordance with cultural norms and social context. And R is regulating emotions with helpful strategies. Recognizing, understanding, and labeling fit right in with self-awareness. So let's practice recognizing and labeling our emotions. So we're going to do an activity to recognize our feelings in the body. Look again at what you wrote about how you're feeling today and think about, has it changed? How did you know what you were feeling? What cues did your body give you? And is what you wrote really describing what you feel? Now take a look at the mood meter on page 6, developed by James Russell, a professor at Boston College, and shared in Permission to Feel. The mood meter is also an app at moodmeterapp.com. The mood meter helps people define emotions on 2 dimensions: energy, or how much physical energy is running through our bodies, and pleasantness, or our subjective private mental experience. The red quadrant is for unpleasant high energy emotions, feelings like anxiety, rage, frustration, anger, and fear. The blue quadrant is for unpleasant low energy feelings like disappointment, sadness, or discouragement. The green quadrant is for pleasant low energy feelings like calm, relaxation, contentment. And the yellow quadrant is for pleasant high energy feelings like joy, excitement, and elation. Can you place your current emotional state onto one of these 4 quadrants? How pleasant do you feel from -5 to +5? How much energy from -5 to +5 is running through your body? What is the color of your quadrant? And if you feel comfortable, please put that in chat.
Some red. It's been a stressful day so far. Green and red. And Amy's posting the link to the playbook again in case people joined us late. Blue. Seeing a little bit of blue, green. Some more blue.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, I've never really thought about this before, but we often place judgment values on emotions. And so, try not to feel like any emotion is good or bad. It's just data. There's no, you're not a good person if you feel in the yellow, and you're not a bad person if you feel in the red. It just is. It's not, there's no value attached to it.
It looks like we're having people kind of across the spectrum. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. All right, so in this next tool, just be aware that the colors are not, they don't connect to the mood meter. It's just a different diagram using similar colors. Another tool for self-awareness is the mood wheel, and you'll see that on page 7. This tool can help you cultivate a nuanced vocabulary for the emotions you feel. Can you find a label for your current emotion that better describes what you are feeling? Is there a word that gets at both your levels of pleasantness and energy? And if you feel comfortable, add that to chat. Christine, do we have time for the little extra question?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so if you feel like sharing in chat, what do you dislike or like about these two tools, the mood meter or mood wheel?
And we're seeing some more nuanced feelings come in.
Nuanced
tired,
words.
yeah,
Great.
content, unfocused, depressed, yeah. And if we think about where we've been for the past 2.5 years, like none of this is a surprise,
Right.
but I think we don't necessarily talk about exactly how we're feeling enough. Tired but eager, I like that. Okay.
You see on this mood wheel those, 7 core terms, those core emotions, and then as you move further out, it kind of gets more nuanced. Great.
All right. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit here, and we're going to talk now about self-management or self-regulation. And self-management is all about managing one's internal states, our impulses, and our resources. It's basically about managing our actions, thoughts, and feelings in flexible ways so that we can get desired results. And it's about being adaptable in changing circumstances, which once again, we have all had to do a lot of in the last 2 years. So our prefrontal lobes are designed to help regulate our response to stress, but they can be overridden by the amygdala. So we actually secrete hormones when we're stressed to help prepare us for fight or flight, but the hormones can actually linger in our bodies much long after whatever stressor has disappeared. And so seemingly minor stressors can actually build up over time. And you may have experienced that where, like, I don't know, you've had kind of a stressful day thus far and you like stub your toe and, like the world has now come to an end because of that. So what we want to do is remember that, once again, these stressors can add up. And as they do so, they can directly impact our working memory, our decision-making, and our overall productivity. So among the sub-elements that Goleman includes in the self-management category are emotional self-control, adaptability, and initiative. If we return again to Mark Brackett's ruler skills, self-management is all about the expressing and regulating of emotions. And as Amy mentioned before, we need to remember that emotions are not good or bad. I think when I was younger, we kind of talked about it like they were, like you had good emotions like happy and bad emotions like anger, but anger can actually be a very healthy emotion when used in the right way. So when we're talking about regulating, we're not talking about suppressing those emotions. We're talking about being able to express them in a way that gets you what you need. Expressing emotions is all about how you're showing how you're feeling to the world. What is it about your voice, your face, your actions that align with how you're feeling? And is how you're feeling helpful for the situation that you're in? Regulating then is all about the strategies that you can use to feel more, less, or the same of what you are feeling. Is your current feeling helpful? If so, what can you do to continue feeling that or perhaps even enhance it? And if it's not helpful for the situation that you're in, what can you do to feel less of that or perhaps change it to something that can be more helpful? So on page 8 of your playbook, Mark Brackett recommends taking time to pause and actually take a meta moment, is what he calls it, to think about what you're feeling before we actually express emotions. And here's kind of 3 statements that he wants you to think about. Here's what I feel and why. Here is what I want to have happen next. And here is what I need from you right now. So to put it in context and be a little vulnerable with y'all, I can actually feel very unconnected and disengaged when I feel like I'm not being heard. It actually makes me feel anxious, and then I can get frustrated and even angry. I also can feel frustrated when I'm trying to learn something new, right? Learning involves friction, and sometimes, we don't want to feel stupid, and it can be hard and all of these things. So I've also learned that when I am feeling frustrated, there's a particular edge that can appear in my voice. I wish I could say that I learned this as a child. I did not. It is a fairly new revelation for me. So if I have had that edge in my voice when I've talked to any one of you, my sincere apologies. So if I'm talking to you though, and you hear this edge, you don't know why I'm frustrated. All you know is Christine is frustrated or even angry. And the story you're automatically going to tell yourself is Christine is frustrated with me. That's a natural response. So what I'm trying to do is pay attention to when I can hear that edge creeping into my voice and take a moment to actually stop and say, you know what? I can hear the frustration in my voice. It's not directed at you. I'm just trying to figure this out. Can I ask you a few more questions? Or I can hear the frustration in my voice. I seem to be having trouble making myself clear. Can we talk this through a little bit more? You can see how simple statements like that, or just taking that moment to kind of figure out where you are and explain that to the other person, can really take down the temperature of the room so that we can move forward. I will admit this takes lots of practice, and self-management is really dependent upon self-awareness.
So let's move on to social competencies, or the emotional intelligence skills that determine how we handle relationships, starting with social awareness. Social awareness is the ability to accurately notice the emotions of others and read situations appropriately. When we talk about the science of social awareness, we talk about empathy. Empathy is our social radar, which relies on biological mimicry. When we see others' facial expressions and interpret them as happy or sad, we can literally feel that emotion. This ability to empathize with others stems from neurons in our extended circuitry to and in the amygdala that read another person's face and voice and attunes to how someone feels as we speak to them. Empathy is dependent upon our own self-awareness, and leaders cannot influence others without empathy. Empathy allows leaders to listen and see others' perspectives. In addition to empathy, other sub-elements include organizational awareness, or being able to read the currents, decision networks, and politics at the organizational level, and service, recognizing and meeting follower, client, or customer needs. So let's look at an example. Who here has heard of or used an empathy map? And if you have, you can just put a thumbs up or a yes in chat. It's borrowed from the world of design thinking, and you can see on page 9 of your playbook that an empathy map consists of 4 quadrants reflecting what another said, did, thought, and felt. An empathy map can be a great tool to use if you're having trouble communicating with someone. It can put you in the other person's shoes by helping you reflect on what they may be thinking and feeling based upon what they said and did. The key here is to do the exercise to help you tap into empathy for the other person, and to follow up later with that person to see if your thoughts are on the right track. Remember, not everyone experiences emotions in the same way or at the same time. So when you check in with that person later, you can say something like, I've thought more about our interaction the other day, and the story I'm telling myself is, and then go into what you learned when you mapped out the interaction to see if you were on the right track. Be willing to listen to what they have to say.
Okay. And lastly, we have relationship management, or the ability to take into consideration our emotions, the emotions of others, and the context of the situation. We want to be able to do this to manage our social interactions successfully. And these social skills are built on all of the previous core emotional intelligence skills: self-awareness, self-management, and social awareness. And it actually can be our most useful tool as leaders when it comes to persuasion and influence. So we now know that we directly influence each other's moods. And this emotional exchange is part of every human interaction. So then relationship skills will allow leaders to put emotional intelligence to work. According to Goleman, important sub-elements in this area include inspirational leadership, so the ability to guide and motivate other people with a compelling vision, having influence over those that you interact with, the desire to develop others via feedback, guidance, coaching, how to be a change catalyst, how to initiate new projects and ideas, and lead in new directions. Conflict management skills, which could be an entire webinar just all in and of itself. Teamwork, collaboration, and how to build bonds and cultivate and maintain a web of relationships. So you can see how a lot of those really pertains to, once again, leaders at all levels of the organization. So a core component of building relationships is using emotional intelligence to communicate effectively. And good communication requires listening skills and asserting skills. And I'll just let you know, if I had seen this chart several years ago, the word asserting would have kind of given me pause, because I was kind of always taught that assertive was like not a thing that you did. But how else do you let people know what it is that you need? So what we want you just to briefly do is turn to page 10 in your playbook and look through the listening and asserting skills that you can practice when you're communicating. And in chat, let us know what resonates with you and what perhaps doesn't. So once again, for example, asserting kind of took me off guard a little bit when I was looking at this. So go ahead and add those to chat. And also let us know, is there anything else that you would add under either listening or asserting skills? We'll give you just a couple minutes to look at that and to add that in chat. Remaining centered can be difficult when you're emotionally triggered. Yeah, it just takes you off guard sometimes, and you're trying to pay attention and you're like off in another world, or you're making assumptions based on how you're feeling. That's a great one. Thank you, Amy, for getting the ball rolling. What else? What else do people like or not like about these listening and asserting skills? So Kara agrees with Amy. Yeah.
And I think persisting, you know, it can verge into aggressive behavior if you persist too forcefully or too many times, you know, especially if it's a supervisor to supervisee relationship where the supervisee is persisting. You know, you've got to be really careful to maintain that relationship. But I think that can be challenging to persist in an assertive way, but not an aggressive way.
Mm-hmm. And to take to Dawn's point about, you know, having the courage also to persevere. Like if you know that maybe you need to speak up, and somebody also put that eye contact can be tricky for some people. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. Sometimes it's just a personal space sort of thing. I mean, eye contact is, it can be very vulnerable. And it might take, I like also what Dawn said about, it might take more than one conversation to feel heard, to keep trying. Yeah, sometimes one of the things I try to remember, and I can't remember where I learned this, is that like you have the sender and the receiver of any message, and it is always the sender's responsibility to make sure that the receiver heard it correctly. And once again, when you think about social media and email and all of these, you know, electronic means of communicating, that can be really, really difficult. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. But thank you guys for kind of sharing that. It's kind of a lot to think about. So what we're going to do now is we're going to spend some time really digging into emotional intelligence from a leadership perspective. So once again, flip back to your self-assessment and note the emotional intelligence core component where you had the highest ratings overall. So you'll see the core components listed with the sub-elements. Kind of take a gander. This is not any scientific method that we've given you, but if you kind of have an idea of which of the 4 core elements that you scored the highest, tuck that in your head. And in just a moment, Amy is going to give us a scenario, which is also located on page 11 of your playbook. And we're going to have you all break into breakout rooms for a few moments based upon your highest core element. So I'm going to have Amy share the scenario, and then I'll kind of explain everything again as well.
Yeah, so again, this scenario is on page 11 of your playbook, followed by a list of emotional intelligence competencies you might find useful as you discuss the scenario. Here's the scenario. So today you're attending a meeting with library staff from across Colorado, and one member is bullying other members. You don't know any of the attendees well. How would you use your strongest core element to address this behavior, either during the meeting or after the meeting, and either with the bully or with the person being bullied, or both? There is some additional information in emotional intelligence competencies listed on page 11 that may help in your discussion.
Okay, so once again, you have the scenario in your playbook, and we're going to have you go into breakout rooms, we think. Let's see what Christine can do here. Breakout rooms. Okay, so in just a moment, you'll see a prompt on the screen, and the 4 core element of emotional intelligence will be listed there: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. You'll select the room where you feel you have the highest in terms of your score, in terms of self-assessment. If you haven't had a chance to take the self-assessment or didn't feel like it, just pick a room. You're all just going to be chatting with one another, and you guys will discuss the scenario. We're going to give you just about 8 to 10 minutes, and you'll get a 60-second warning before we bring you back to the room. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms here. And is everybody seeing the rooms? This is always the part that when I'm sharing the screen.
Yeah, and when you're in your room, feel free to interact with chat. Sometimes I feel so overwhelmed when I'm in a room that I don't want to be seen. I don't want to use my voice, but feel free to interact in chat if you're feeling just a little bit like you want to hide.
And you should see something maybe down at the bottom of the screen that allows you to join a breakout room, and then you can click join. So I see people going in now. Cool. Excellent. And for those of you who haven't joined, totally cool. You're not required to join a room, but down at the bottom of the screen, you should see where you could, or if you want to let me know what room you want to go in chat, I can also make that happen. But once again, if you just want to kick back, that is perfectly allowed also. And it's interesting. We do not have anybody in relationship management. So I guess none of us have good relationships.
I guess not.
It's kind of interesting. So about 5 minutes left. About 3 minutes. I think I'm going to give them 8 total. So we have time to share out. And I think I forgot to tell them to take notes. So hopefully they'll remember what they're talking about. Just about a minute left. There should be starting to come back or be yanked back in 15 seconds, which always is good. It means that they're having a good conversation. Two, one, zoinks.
Here they all come.
Here they all come back. And I think I'm going to stop share for this. All right. So I think most everybody is back. And I think I forgot to tell you all to have somebody take notes, because there's always something I forget in a webinar. But why don't we start with the first group, and now my brain has just gone completely blank. Social awareness. No, that's the second one. Self-awareness. Self-awareness. Let's start with self-awareness. Does anybody from the self-awareness group want to share what you talked about? You can either type it in chat or feel free to unmute yourself, and you can have your video on or off as you see fit. Anyone?
I'll talk. It was only two of us in there. And my partner, her microphone doesn't work on her computer.
Ah, gotcha.
So some of the things that we talked about in terms of self-awareness, just, knowing which emotions experiencing and the why. And also I mentioned it during the presentation, or maybe pull the bully aside and ask them, what are they hoping to, what are their desired outcomes in engaging in this type of behavior, in this setting. And, also maybe talking to the person who actually is being bullied and, asking them, giving them that platform to listen to them, and allow them to assert, their feelings in the situation. So, yeah.
Excellent.
I like that.
I really like how you used the specific skills of self-awareness to address that scenario. Great job.
Yeah, and I like, talking to the bully and asking, like, what are they hoping to achieve? Because to us it will feel like bully, or it seems like bullying, but they may not even be aware of it, and like, what are their goals? So perfect. I like that. So that's self-awareness. Social awareness. Does somebody who was in the social awareness group want to share?
I think I was in social awareness. We definitely had some technical issues.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So we really didn't get it. We weren't even connecting until maybe 7 minutes in. And then at that point we had forgotten the prompt.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Zoom
okay.
is such a bully sometimes.
So yeah, we really didn't get any discussion about the prompt done. And then I think we were just going to start talking about like emotional things at work. And I had mentioned one thing that I need to work on is staying an active and curious listener when I'm upset.
Yes. I love that. Yes, active and curious. And it's hard to do because like I said, the emotions just kind of take over and our rational brain just like shuts off. So thank you for making the best out of the situation, showing some emotional intelligence as you did not have as with the technical difficulties, and for sharing that. Let's see. What is the next one? We didn't have anybody in relationship management. And now, once again, my brain isn't working, and now I can't remember the third core element.
No, the one is...
It is... Why is this so hard? We literally just talked about all of
We do
this.
this all the time.
I think it's the social, isn't it?
Yes,
awareness.
social awareness. Thank you, Nicole. That is perfect. Does anybody who was in the social awareness one want to talk about what you talked about? And hopefully you did not also have technical difficulties. No one? So in chat, Brittany is saying, for social awareness, we discussed approaching the bully and how comfortable we feel in certain situations. Yeah, you have to assess where you are in the moment also. That's a good point. Anything else from anybody in that group that you want to share? Okay, I'm going to pull our slides back up. Joanna had a great response to something that she learned about approaching these situations. Joanna, do you want to share?
Sure.
Being voluntold.
I have been voluntold, and that's okay. I'm sorry I'm not going to turn on my camera.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I was sharing with the group that a little while ago I had attended an ALA conference in which they were discussing bullying in the nursing field. And that may be a surprise considering that ALA is a library association. However, it was quite relevant in that librarians and libraries are also community needs, people and relationship-based work. Anyway, long story short, one of the things that I learned within that session was that when bullying is happening, one of the things that you have to do publicly is know how to properly stop it, because it is an aggression, right? And so to be able to stop it by saying, hey, are you okay? Or to say something like, maybe I'm misunderstanding. What do you mean with that? But just to kind of stop that aggression from happening publicly. Then the other thing that I shared with the group was that I've encountered a very similar situation in my chairing duties of committees. And one of the things that I have chosen to do is, again, to interrupt that and to say, let me make sure I'm not misunderstanding this. But having an aside private conversation with that person to make sure that, one, they feel heard if it is an issue, but also two, to set the expectation, right? To be assertive enough to say, hey, so this is how this committee works and what you're doing is not okay. So let's just go ahead and reset and come back with that expectation now verbally, communicated to you. Thank you. That was it.
No, that's great. And I like, bringing previous experience and other things that you've heard. And we basically kind of heard twice that it's sort of like, if somebody is being a bully, that it kind of does need to be addressed, because it can kind of derail the whole conversation, whether or not they're intending to be a bully or not. And so I like that. And then somebody had added in chat, bear with me one second. I have too many mice and too many screens.
I can grab it, Christine. It says, many of us agree it's easier to confront the bully than interact with the emotional response of those affected by the bully, because it also causes an emotional response in us with our empathy, I think is what they're saying. And I completely agree. Like, it might be easier to stay rational and be assertive with that bully than get involved in the emotional stuff that's going on with the bullied person.
Perfect. So we want you guys to see if this will go back to where I intended it to be. So first of all, thank you all for working with us in the breakout rooms and putting up with potentially some technical difficulties as we had you kind of work through the scenario. But what we wanted you to do as we sort of wrap up today is we wanted to be able to give you guys an action plan for things that you can do moving forward. So you can see on the screen, and this is also on page 14 of your playbook, but we want you to take a look at your self-assessment, and now, instead of selecting the core element where you think that you scored high, look at maybe one where you scored a little bit lower, something that you might want to work on. Then turn to page 14 in your playbook, list that element or sub-element if it is relevant. Sometimes being a little bit more specific can be helpful. Think about everything that we talked about today and pick a strategy or two that you could commit to practicing over the next month and list that in your playbook. If for some reason the examples that we've given as we talked about the core elements or when you were in your breakout groups just really weren't grabbing you, if you look on page 15, there are a ton of emotional intelligence resources, including some that lead to other activities. So you might take a look at those to kind of figure out maybe where you want to focus your attention. And then lastly, think about somebody that you work with that you think excels in the skill that you're wanting to practice. Note that person in your playbook and set a date to contact them later this month in order to do that.
Yeah, and don't forget to look at all the resources we've included at the end of the playbook, and I'll go ahead and paste that in the chat one more time, just in case anyone missed that earlier. Christine, are you able to upload that Word document again?
Yes, I will do that again. Let's see here. So while I'm doing that, if anybody has, we have about 5 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or type it in chat. And I'm going to put the Word version of the document in. And also, I'm going to pull up a survey that we would like to have you take, but we're happy to take any questions or thoughts that you may have. And bear with me while I'm trying to pull up the survey. Too many computers. Emotional intelligence might be, don't have so many computers. All right, so I just put the survey in the chat as well. Also, as we're waiting for questions, if anybody needs a certificate for today's session, I'm going to type in my email address. And you can send me an email asking for a certificate. And then the archive for today's session, as well as the playbook and the slides for today's session are going to be posted at the Libraries Learn website, probably in a couple hours, but you can revisit the Libraries Learn website. And if you look at the calendar for today, once again, in a couple hours, I'll have the archive, the slides, the playbook, and any of the other resources that we talked about today. So I'm not seeing any questions coming through. So once again, last call for questions. But if we don't have any additional questions, both Amy and I want to thank everybody for attending today and participating and going through some of the activities as we all talk about emotional intelligence. The Colorado State Library is doing a CSLN session tomorrow, which you can also find access to on Libraries Learn, on working with tweens. So maybe one of the things you want to practice with emotional intelligence is working with tweens. And you can join us for our CSLN session tomorrow as well. But it was great seeing everybody. And if there are no questions, then we'll wish everybody a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.